Welcome everyone. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are joining us from. It's always a pleasure to be back online with you all for a live discussion series covering strategic commodities and territories in African mining. A little reminder, Africa Mining Forum is hosted by the Rwanda Mines Petroleum and Gas Board and is working in partnership with Mining Review Africa and TSC, the stakeholder company based in Singapore. So now, Africa Mining Forum and Mining Review Africa have been providing regular and engaging content for about 18 months to ensure that the mining community remains connected 365 days a year, despite the constraints that we know were brought by the pandemic. Thanks to you and your engagement on all the different platforms we've been provided, we've really grew this community by ensuring that we remain your partner of choice when it comes to delivering content and establishing a trusted source of information for you all. But there's more. Mining Elite in Africa publication and Africa Mining Forum have merged and are creating now a digital award ceremony and winners acknowledgement at this year's Africa Mining Forum, taking place from the 2nd to the 4th of November 2021 online. We're going to celebrate the leaders, company, and projects that are making a real difference in the sector, from breakthrough in environmental challenges to finance, health and safety, engineering, and technology. Nominations are still open, so please go now and vote. Just a reminder as well that you're watching this live from Mining Africa Connect, our digital platform, and we really encourage you to connect with your peers. You're now part of about 3,300 mining community already engaged since our digital event last year. We are hosting all the live and on-demand session and providing a user-friendly experience. We do hope so. You can find all the participants under the Meet the Community tab. You connect with them now, use the chat function to engage, ask your question, and answer all the polls from one place. Obviously, the session will be able on demand after the recording. Sorry, it will be done. And you can find everything on the Watch on Demand tab. And the good part is you can keep on engaging with your audience and networking even when the session is over. The only thing we can provide is the drinks. I'm sorry about this. So back to today's live discussion. I'm sure I don't introduce her again, but please meet Laura Cornish, Editor-in-Chief of Mining Review Africa and Head of Content at Clarion Africa. And she'll be moderating today's conversation around the exciting diamond industry. We can all agree that diamond is a commodity on its own and is following an interesting development looking at natural versus lab grown. We'll have the pleasure to welcome two experts on the topic and would love to hear from you during today's session. So if you have any question for our speakers, feel free to engage, send through the question in the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. I promise we'll do our best to answer all your questions during today's session. If we don't get to yours, we'll make sure we follow up with the speakers afterwards. And lastly, we encourage you to share today's webinar with the social network using the hashtag Africa Mining Forum and Mining Review Africa. Okay, now back to conversation. My time is up. I'm going to let the time to Laura to kick off today's conversation. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Elodie, and a warm welcome to everyone from myself. Today's topic is an interesting one and one that seems apt for me to lead, considering its significance to women. Every woman wants a diamond at some point in their lives, after all. But do we want a natural diamond, rare and unique and incredibly special, considering the effort undergone to recover it and beautify it? Are we concerned about the impact our diamond mines are having on the environment, and as such feel the purchase of a lab-grown diamond pays greater respect to Mother Earth? Is the choice a definite hard option for one or the other, or is there more to this topic than we know? Let me not presume to have all the answers, since I have two panelists joining me today who are far more experts on the subject than myself. And so I'd like to give a very warm welcome to James Campbell. James is the MD of Botswana Diamonds, and I'm almost sure most of you know is undeniably a stalwart of the diamond mining industry. Joining James today is also Paul Zimniski. Paul has been a long-term loyal supporter of Mining Review Africa and has always contributed valuably to our diamonds features. His analyst expertise on diamonds is unparalleled. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. We also have something special to showcase in our session, two snippet video inserts from David Kelly, the CEO of Natural Diamond Council, who caught up with Elodie recently, and David brings an additional expert view and opinion to our conversation today. So before we get started, I'd like to ask our audience to participate in a poll that we'll be running. Our poll will be up on screen for a minute, and this is what our question today is asking. Looking at the future trends and demand outlook, as an end user, would you rather invest into natural diamonds, given the market value they are still holding, or support the growth of lab-grown diamonds, giving more source transparency and value for money? So for those of you, you are on our Miner platform. So the way to participate in our poll is to look on the right-hand side of your screen. There is a poll tab. Click on that, and then you can vote in our poll. So we're going to leave it on the screen for just a few more seconds because we do want you to take the time to participate with us in that. And if we have the time, we're going to review those results and share them with our two panelists later on in the session. One more time, looking at the future trends and demand outlook as an end user, would you rather invest into natural diamonds given the market value they are still holding, or support the growth of lab-grown diamonds giving more source transparency and value for money? Great, so for those of you who are still thinking about it, you can still participate as we go through the session. So without further ado, I know we want to hear from James, we want to hear from Paul. So let's jump straight into it. Paul, I think a good starting point is to discuss, the current outlook for natural diamonds in the global markets. What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. As far as the outlook for the market, I think everything's having a moment right now, whether it be residential real estate, stocks, digital currencies, lumber, tin, sports cards, memorabilia, you name it, and jewelry is too, for sure. When I look at natural diamond prices, as far as, percentage returns in the last, few quarters or so, prices are the strongest I've seen in years, probably since, 2011. If you look at Alrosa, it's the largest diamond producer in the world by volume. They're currently saying their inventories are at historic lows. Retailers are aggressively placing orders. The midstream, the manufacturers, the cutters and polishers, they're trying to keep up with the retailer demand. They can't get enough rough diamonds at the moment. So, I would say in general, diamond jewelry demand is quite strong right now. And I would say it's the US and mainland China, as the primary demand drivers. Looking forward, I think this could continue, perhaps, driven by pent up, wedding demand in the second half of this year, followed by, perhaps another strong holiday season. It seems like diamond consumers are in a financial position to keep consuming. Unfortunately, I would say that the biggest economic takeaway from the pandemic is, even greater wealth separation, driven by monetary policy and fiscal stimulus. It's driving asset prices higher. So those that own assets are doing quite well right now, and that tends to be the diamond and jewelry and the luxury consuming demographic.
Awesome, Paul, thank you very much. James, Botswana Diamonds has projects in Botswana and South Africa, and you obviously are keenly aware and well exposed to diamond prices yourself. Was the diamond industry actually impacted by the demand downfall that maybe happened during the pandemic? Is that an accurate statement, James?
Laura, thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much indeed for having me on a panel, and lovely to see Paul as well too. At the beginning of the pandemic, when we sat down as a board about how we're going to face this, knowing that seeing that diamond prices had fallen by 20 to 30%, but also having been in the diamond business a very long time, more than 35 years, and having been a reader of diamond history going all the way back to the 19th century, diamond prices always fall hard and fast when you have a global catastrophe. Whether it's the global financial crisis, whether it's the COVID pandemic, whether it's the Spanish flu, you name it. They fall hard and fast, but they always come back again. And Paul alluded to that very well in his previous statement. So we saw this as a time of opportunity. So it wasn't a time to kind of go into hibernation for 2 years. So what have we done is we've actually done 3 deals in Botswana since the beginning of the COVID pandemic. We did a deal with Petra, in Botswana through their Sikaka exploration vehicle, a royalty-based deal. We did the deal through Dimextrat, a private Botswana company, along with their Australian-listed Burgundy resources, where we did a farm-out arrangement on our exploration licenses. And then we announced on Monday a partnership with Vast Resources to acquire the Gagu mine, also in the Central Kalahari of Botswana. And every time we were allowed in South Africa, we kept on working at Thorny River and made 2 very good discoveries in terms of the diamond pipes and blows on the kimberlite dike complex. So in summary, diamond business goes up and down. We're in the business of exploration and project development. And as we all know, to take a diamond discovery through to production takes time, effort and money. So we saw this as being a time of opportunity, where many people saw woe is me, and hopefully we've been able to extract that opportunity as we're now going into a rising diamond price scenario.
Excellent, James. Thank you. Both of our diamond speakers today, ever the optimists, but I think absolutely spot on with where they see the diamond industry at the moment, and really positive as we move forward. So I do want to bring David Kelly into this conversation fairly soon in our discussion. So I'm going to throw into our first video and let's hear what Elodie and David had to speak about. Yeah, let's go.
Obviously, we've seen the growth of the lab-grown diamond. What do you think on your side is, why are they taking such a bigger space on the international arena, and especially with the new generation? And on your side, what can be done to ensure that the actual natural diamond can meet the ESG requirement that we mentioned around the community, the environment, traceability, and on?
Yeah, so maybe if I break that down into two questions. Excuse me. First of all, the question about lab growns.
Yeah.
Lab growns are estimated, I think analysts in the industry estimate them to be around 4 or 5% of the total diamond industry. So they're still small, but they're growing. They're growing quite quickly. And really, for me, they occupy a space that natural diamonds doesn't, and that's a price point. And that price is continuing to decrease. So, and the more the price differential grows between the two, the more the consumer clearly understands them and sees them as two different products from an emotional and sentimental point of view. I make a point of not speaking too much about lab-grown diamonds, just because it's not where our focus is. From my view, there is so much potential in the natural diamond industry. You know, we've underperformed luxury up until the last year and a half. There's so much potential to be gained. So all of our energy goes into inspiring the consumers with the magic of natural diamonds. And in practice, probably if natural diamonds go up, so will lab growns. People will be buying more into the diamond industry. So it's why I somewhat don't spend too much time talking about them. I hope you don't mind that. But it's,
no, of course not.
But our focus is on natural diamonds and the magic that they can create in people's lives. So that brings me on to the second question, which is about ESGs, and sustainability is clearly a very strong topic. It was an emerging topic before the pandemic. It clearly accelerated during the pandemic, as people became better connected with the impact that we have on the planet and people, and social responsibility. I think the challenge that we have is that we talk as an industry, and we are an industry, and whereas most other companies, you think in fashion, every brand in fashion has its own positioning on sustainability.
Identity, yeah.
Yeah, an identity around it. And so from our perspective, we talk about it as an industry. And what our industry does as an industry is what the consumer understands. And the reason why I say that is that everybody in the industry has to play a part in that, because both in the positive values that we create, but also the potential damage if wrong things are done, that affects the whole of the industry. And so we as a diamond industry, from mining, supply chain, cutting and polishing, retail, we all have to be focused on the values of what we stand for, and what we are bringing ultimately to the consumer. I've only been in this industry for less than 2 years. I joined just before the pandemic, which was not good timing from my side. But actually, like many people coming into this industry, we're amazed at what is done positively for the world. And clearly, the diamond industry suffers from a legacy narrative that dates back over decades. But actually, because of that, that's actually been a positive. Over the last 20 years, the work done by all of our members, by many throughout the supply chain, in terms of supporting the environment, supporting communities, supporting wildlife, is quite spectacular. The fashion industry, many other industries are nowhere near what we do. That's not to say we should rest on our laurels, because we still have a lot more to do, but we should also.
Very encouraging.
Yeah, and we've just launched a campaign this week, which does just that. It's called Thank You, by the way, to be able to talk to the consumer. The consumer doesn't digest long CSR reports. So for us, with our expertise in consumer communication, it's really about being able to tell that message in 2 or 3 seconds.
Yeah, educating the crowd.
Yeah, the consumer doesn't want to read a long CSR report with an analysis. They want to see short form
what are you actually doing?
Yeah, that what you're doing and how you're supporting it. And so we've launched this campaign. We'll be running it throughout the world. We'll be running it both ourselves and with local partners who can then adapt it for their own usage. But ultimately, it all comes down to us collectively as a group continuing to strive hard to meet those goals. We work very closely with the Responsible Jewelry Council and the amazing work that they do. I think they are very, very important part of the diamond industry, as being the independent auditors, the experts on these topics. They're there to support members of the industry. Respect completely that not everybody in the industry understands fully what the goals are, how to go about achieving them, and the RJC does a wonderful job of education, of hand-holding people through a process to become properly audited by the RJC.
That's great, and it's just supporting them as well to for investors as well. It's very important to look at this aspect that you mentioned, and seeing the progress that's being made is obviously very helpful. ESG being at the center of a lot of investment decision making nowadays. I think it's a very relevant, I would say, initiative.
Yeah, I mean and it's great. I mean the focus that the world is having on the ESGs and the sustainability topic is great for us all. It can never move quick enough. We know the damage that is being done to the planet, but the fact that people are making decisions based on not just financial goals, but sustainability values as well. And again, all I would say is that for anyone that wants to know more about the industry sustainability values, either myself or the RJC, I'm more than happy to spend time with and help support.
Brilliant insights from David, and great addition to our discussion that we're having. So I'm going to dive right back into it. I'm going to ask Paul and James back onto screen. Great. Paul, I think let's talk about demand as part of this conversation. And, a lot of it is driven by the US market. So in your opinion, what is changing in the current supply chain dynamics?
Right. So I think it's important to understand the initial recovery in the industry last year was driven by the Chinese market. That was the first major market to reopen. So I think that makes good sense. I would say in 2021, it's been more the US that's been the very strong market leading the industry. If we look at Signet Jewelers, it's the largest jewelry conglomerate here in the US. They raised full year revenue guidance twice in just the first half of this year. I've never seen anything like that before. I think it kind of shows you the strength in the market right now, and it's real end consumer demand that's driving this. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. For I guess context here, the US is the largest consumer market of diamond jewelry globally. It represents about half of global diamond demand. So I would say it's always one of the most, if not the most important market for the industry, and I think we're seeing that play out well right now. I think if we look longer term, I see China and India combined as potentially eclipsing the US in market share at some point in the future, whether it's 5 years or a decade from now, but they're the fastest growing large markets. So I see China and India becoming possibly the most important markets at some point in the future. But right now, the US remains the largest consumer market of diamonds, and the US has been a very strong market so far in 2021.
Thanks, Paul. For now, one commodity that's not entirely dominated by the Chinese. James, one of the things that David, it sort of came across quite a lot in David's interview, and that I want to speak about is the topic of sustainability. So I think, how do you work towards sustainable and perhaps cost-efficient operations to overcome those challenges associated with sustainable natural diamond production?
Thank you, Laura. It's a very, very interesting question. And in fact, about 2 weeks ago, I gave a presentation to a Geological Society panel on ESG. And rather than calling this ESG or sustainability, I far prefer to call it the social license to operate. You've been granted a mining license by the state, and therefore it's much more than that. You have a social license to operate correctly. And what does that mean? Of course, it means a way of working. It's not just a tick box exercise where you have auditors coming in and checking, do you adhere to the right environmental standards? Have you done the right level of social engagement and collaboration? Are your governance procedures correct? It's much more than that. It's a way of working and it's a way of life. And then to add to that little nuance about cost efficiency, here is a very, very interesting dynamic in Southern Africa at the moment. In order to be cost efficient, you need very strong and in-depth technical skills, along with an empowered and well-educated workforce. We all understand the youth unemployment in Southern Africa at the moment, and that's a particularly interesting dynamic to follow. So if in the latter part of my brief conversation here is I'd just like to use our latest proposed acquisition of Gagu as an example, and being very mindful of the strategic importance of diamonds to Botswana, especially after I've been operating in Botswana for the last 30 years. What can an operation such as this do? It has the potential of having a negative carbon footprint. Some might think, gosh, is that possible? Well, yes, it is. De Beers and many other people are looking at DMS tailings and kimberlite tailings, which after all are a basic volcanic rock, as being carbon negative. You combine that with solar power and efficient use of water and electricity, you can end up with a negative carbon footprint mine. And I think if you package this together, this strong focus on ESG is not only a way of work, but the right thing to do from a moral and ethical perspective, but also a business imperative too, as many funders want you to actually live and breathe this and prove it before they start to give an investment to a diamond mine, or in fact any other kind of mine.
James, I'm so glad you brought up social license to operate. I feel like the ESG term has kind of overclouded it a little bit, and we've kind of forgotten the roots of what we need to do when we come into a country. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, and it's just good for our audience to hear that diamond mines can be sustainable to the point of actually having a negative carbon footprint. So maybe there's just an education piece for end users to understand that. But some valid points there, James. Thank you. Paul, from your perspective, how do we go about addressing some of these ESG concerns, because they exist whether they're real or not? How do we overcome that?
Yeah, so I would say, like, in one way or another at this point, I see all of the large corporate, if you will, miners at least taking various initiatives with the focus on minimizing environmental impact while maximizing local employment and social benefits within the communities they operate. And it's kind of happening in front of our eyes right now. It's accelerating quite rapidly in the industry, whether it be De Beers or Alrosa, or even a mid-tier company like Lucara Diamond that has a single asset in Botswana. But these companies have really stepped up their game recently. And you're seeing it across the supply chain. It's not just the miners, it's the midstream manufacturers, it's the retailers. I just actually outlined a bunch of examples of this in a piece that I wrote for India's GJEPC. It's the big trade body for the manufacturers in India. You can find a link to that on my website. But I think the key to all of these initiatives, I guess, with the diamond industry specifically, is to be able to provide a reliable diamond tracking solution, so the end consumer can reward the companies that are doing the right things. So the point being is, when a consumer goes to a jewelry store, they have the grading certificate with all the the qualifications of the diamond, but hopefully we'll get to the point where that consumer is also going to know where that diamond came from specifically, whether it's a country, a company, or a specific mine. And I think this, as far as this Providence, tracking initiative, it's been an area of priority for the industry for a few years now, and it's really starting to, we're starting to see, some serious progress on this front. But the idea is, once the consumer knows where the diamond came from, they could reward the companies that are doing the right thing, and then you get that, that positive feedback loop. And I think we're getting to the point where hopefully consumers will soon know where their diamond came from. Tiffany's a good example of a company already doing this, but I expect others to follow shortly.
Great examples there, Paul. Thank you very much. I'm keen to hear from you what your thoughts are about millennials. Paul, do you think we're seeing a turning point in the industry? I mean, the figure I've got is that about, roughly 70% of millennials are actually considering buying lab-grown alternatives. What is your input or your view on that, Paul?
Yeah, so I guess this has been my take for 4 or 5 years now, and it hasn't really changed. But I think when we look at the diamond industry and we look at natural diamonds versus man-made diamonds, I think there will be a general bifurcation between the application of man-made diamonds and fashion and fine jewelry. And I think when you really understand this industry, you see that there is a segment between fine and fashion jewelry, and it's not necessarily a technical term, but it tends to describe lower price jewelry versus the much more expensive higher price jewelry. And I think we're seeing that play out right now. And I would to give an example, I would say the more fashion oriented jewelers are adopting man-made diamonds more readily. We've seen that with Swarovski. They're known for their crystals, and now Pandora, they're known for their charm bracelets. And those are examples, I would say, of fashion jewelers that are currently adopting man-made stones. But when you look at the fine jewelers and the high jewelers like the Tiffany's, they've indicated that their customers want natural diamonds, and they don't have plans to change their offering at the moment. And I think then you kind of have the companies that are somewhere in between. You have the mid-tier jewelers that are offering maybe some man-made diamonds as just another product offering. We've seen that with some of the jewelers here in the US and some of the larger department stores. But I think in general, I think a lot of these jewelry companies are hesitant to aggressively push man-made diamonds over natural, because I think it could, from a business standpoint, result in a revenue hit, since generic man-made diamonds at least tend to sell for just a fraction of what natural diamonds do. And I've done analysis on this, and I think at the moment the relative profit margin of man-made diamonds is actually higher than it is with natural stones, but I think that's temporary. It's because it's a new novel product. But I think, looking longer term, I think you get to the point where some of these companies are concerned that, if their new business model is to sell a $500 engagement ring versus a $5,000 engagement ring, that could have, implications on the business model going forward. But again, I think that's just kind of speaking generally. I think there will be, man-made diamond producers that, market the product as a premium product. It's either going to be vertically produced, say in the US, using renewable energy, and they build a strong brand around it, and they could get a premium price. So I think you're going to see, the market segmented, and it's not just going to be general man-made diamond versus natural diamonds. There's segments within that. So I think it's important to appreciate the nuance there. But again, I guess my opinion, I think it would be a mistake for someone like Tiffany to start carrying the product. They don't sell any other, synthetic gems. I mean, if they did, start selling man-made diamonds, it would probably be selling the Tiffany brand more than the lab diamond, as you would. But I think, again, I think this could have an impact on top line longer term. So I think that's kind of the way that I'm looking at it at the moment. And I guess just one more comment on, I guess, just the fundamentals of the market, not to minimize the scientific achievement that making diamonds is. But you have to remember that man-made diamonds are a manufactured product. So theoretically, at least in the longer term, we could produce as many of them as we want. And I mean, longer term, you have to remember that jewelry, is only one application for diamond, and that the high-tech market is multiples larger than the jewelry market. And I think it's the ultimate holy grail for a lot of these man-made diamond producers. And I think one of the biggest keys for these man-made diamond companies is to get the cost of the diamond low enough, get that that raw material cost down, so these high-tech companies could actually use diamond in these applications where it may not be economic to do so right now. But the point being is I think there's efforts being made to get that production cost even lower. And I think, at the end of the day, that lower price trajectory is also going to, be apparent with the man-made diamond jewelry market as well. So I think David was talking about this before, but what I'm seeing is the products getting segmented because of, I would say, the price point most specifically right now.
Thanks, Paul. Somehow, in my opinion, it seems wrong that when you're talking about a diamond, price point is such a high up, topic of consideration, but I suppose it is what it is. James, I'd like to turn the conversation to yourself, and I think one of the important elements that we need to discuss is exploration. You are very active in that space, and to point out that I'm sure as many of our audience do probably know, there's been very few, if actually none, you can correct me if I'm wrong, James, new kimberlite discoveries in the last 2 decades, roughly. And in my mind, that would actually make natural diamonds more rare and, yes, perhaps more expensive. But do you think this scenario is actually going to drive more people towards lab diamonds? And maybe, James, as an add-on to that, you can talk about technology, where it is in terms of kimberlite discoveries and how that could influence people's buying choice if new mines were found and built.
Thank you very much, Laura. You've asked me a multifaceted question.
I have.
But to answer your first point about the lack of diamond discoveries or commercial diamond discoveries over the past two decades, you're right to a very large degree, because Karowe, or AK6, as it was known in the days of discovery, was actually found in the 1960s and only rediscovered fairly recently, and it's now the fabulous mine that it was. The only significant diamond discovery in southern Africa over the last 2 decades is probably Petra's discovery of KX36 in the Central Kalahari, which runs at a grade of 35 carats per 100 tons and a diamond value of $100 per carat or thereabouts. And that is the only one that I know of which has the potential to be commercial. Now, why has there been a lack of diamond discoveries over the past couple of decades? Well, some may think it's a function of geology, or some may think it's a function of political risk. Yes, that might be the case, but I would also like to say it's probably more a function of the lack of investment going into diamond exploration, chiefly because of the general reduction in risk appetite flowing from the global financial crisis. Now, how can I say this? Well, before the global financial crisis, there were probably a dozen or more junior explorers in Southern Africa, many of them listed in London, particularly on the AIM market, others being listed in Australia and on the TSX and TSXV, and now there are only 2. My company, Botswana Diamonds, and then Canadian TSX listed Pangolin Diamonds. So that tells you, if you've only got 2 companies doing diamond exploration, where there is always a challenge in raising money, the likelihood of finding discoveries as a whole is generally lower as such. And then going on to the middle part of your question about natural diamonds and lab diamonds, is that picking up very much on what David mentioned in his interview and what Paul mentioned a moment ago, I think we can learn a lot from other luxury good markets. And this is something that I looked at when I was at De Beers probably more than 20 years ago, when they saw at this time where we are going to be now and where we actually could be in the future. And there's a lot to learn from, whether it be the sapphire market, the ruby market, or the pearl market. And if I just kind of briefly comment on the pearl market, you've got 3 different very niche products. You've got the natural, highly branded products such as the Mikimoto pearls. You've got the cultured or grown, which are still natural, and you've got the synthetic or lab grown. And each has its own price point, and each has its own market as such. And I feel that is the way you'll get differentiation in the diamond market between lab grown and natural. And then moving on to your question about exploration, Laura, I'm of the view that most of the easy and perhaps many of the not so easy diamond deposits have been found. And therefore, what are you going to do to actually find something new? If you keep on doing the same as what's been done in the past, you won't find anything. you'll carry on wasting shareholders' money and basically covering ground. So the three things I would like to leave your audience with on this area is that you've got to use new technology or mixes of new technology. For example, what we're doing in the Thorney River area in South Africa is a combination of detailed structural mapping along with detailed ground geophysics. And just to emphasize that point, an esteemed colleague of mine from De Beers, Bill McKechnie, had a saying that every time there was a paradigm shift in technology, the exploration clock started again in a particular area. And there's no better example of the rediscovery of AK6 in the Arapa cluster than that. The second thing is the level of precision has to be much higher. And why do I say that is that the KX36 discovery made by Petra, and it was a phenomenal job. That ground had been covered by many other previous operators before, and they made no discoveries. Petra had a very, very meticulous approach to their exploration, and it was this discovery came about literally from the discovery of 2 or 3 kimberlitic grains originally. And to find those kimberlitic grains in a whole swathe of Kalahari sand demands huge precision. And I think the third part from this, and this may not be surprising to many because my mother was a historian and she kept on telling me, James, you must always learn the lessons of history, is try and understand the historical and corporate context of why previous operators made decisions. For example, when you're going into an area and you look at the retention reports written by previous corporates, there would be possibly very good reasons why they abandoned areas at that moment in time because of the world at that particular point and because of their corporate context at that point. And it's very important to understand that because things change both from a corporate and a historical perspective. So how do you kind of mix all these together in terms of the work that we are doing? As far as it's possible, and the science is still developing, we try and target our exploration on those areas where there is a higher potential to find or discover a well above average dollar per carat. Because as we've heard before on this panel, there is obviously the threat of synthetics, but this is dominantly in the smaller stones and the poorer quality stones. So if you can find diamond deposits which are in excess of $150 per carat, for example, as an average rough price, you stand a much better chance of having a long-term sustainable business. I hope I've managed to cover your multifaceted question there, Laura.
James, indeed you have. Thank you very much. We've got a couple of questions that have come through from the audience, 1 or 2 really good ones. So Paul, first one is specifically for you and is coming from a senior analyst at Rio Tinto. And you might have touched on it a bit, but I think let's go through the question. And they're asking, Paul, what is your view on lab-grown diamonds, on lab-grown diamond growth and that penetrating the natural diamond shares?
Right. Well, thanks for the question. So what kind of comes to mind is if you look at CZ cubic zirconia, CZ sales actually exceed that of natural diamonds, and it has for a long time now, and nobody really talks about that or really cares about that. And the reason is because the products are marketed differently, the price point's vastly different. I do think it's reasonable at some point in the future we will see, man-made diamond sales exceed that of natural diamonds. Again, it's a man-made diamond's a manufactured product. We could theoretically produce as many as we want. So just from a volume standpoint, I think we will see that at some point in the future. But again, kind of getting back to the the previous comments that I made, I do think most of these man-made diamond goods will be sold as fashion jewelry at a much different price point from natural diamonds. I think when you look at the diamond industry in general, it's really important to understand how important marketing is. And I think anybody that's familiar with De Beers, the Diamond is Forever campaign kind of understands some of this, but it's a discretionary, it's a luxury product. We don't need diamonds, we want diamonds. We buy them because they make us feel good, and so much of that has to do with marketing. And if you were to tell me that the man-made diamond industry is going to have this hugely successful marketing campaign, I think that would kind of change the way that I look at the industry longer term. Right now, I would say I probably wouldn't bet against the natural diamond industry, and David's leading the charge with the NDC right now. But marketing is such a huge part of this, and I think, when we look at the penetration of, man-made diamonds, say taking, what percentage of market share from natural diamonds, I think so much of it is going to come down to, marketing and the way that the consumer ultimately perceives the product. And we're talking a lot about pricing. That's only one component. A lot of it has to do with the way the product is marketed and branded. And right now it seems, as if the natural diamond industry is doing the right thing by reinitiating, generic diamond marketing. I think David's kind of the right guy in charge there. I think he's doing a great job so far. But to anybody that's kind of analyzing this industry, I think so much of this is going to come down to marketing at the end of the day.
Let's not underestimate the importance of marketing here. James, we've got a great question. It comes from John Bristow. I suppose we shouldn't be surprised that John is listening in. Another great diamond expert in our industry, and a bit of a tough question, but I think a really good one. So James, I'd love you to give a shot at responding on this one. And John is saying, well, ESG and so-called sustainability is all well and good, but how then do we address the situation in Namaqualand, where millions of carats have been mined over almost 100 years, and yet there are very few positive legacies to show for people on the ground other than large environmental challenges? You list a few company names. I don't think we need to go into that, but James, how would you respond to that?
Thank you, Laura. This is like a bit of a hospital pass, but a very, very good question by John. And like you said, I'm not surprised that he asked a question such as that. And I'm going to attempt to give an answer which is going to be wholly inadequate, but I'm at least going to try and address it. I think the first thing that one must say is that mining, as we all know, is something which has a beginning and an end. It is not like any other business. When you start mining a gold deposit, a copper deposit, a diamond deposit, you will start through exploration and you will eventually finish and the mining company will leave. I think that's probably the first most important thing I'd like to state. The second thing, which I think is one of my off-the-cuff views on this, and it's something that we've been thinking about for a long time, is that there seems to be a disconnect between state revenues from a particular diamond mining asset and from local revenues. Because of course, I know, having worked for De Beers, as did John for many, many years, they paid their taxes, they were a good operator, they had the social license to operate, but most of the state revenue actually went straight to central government and straight to the state, and very little of it, as John quite rightly points out, actually went to the local environment to deal with a post-life of mine situation, which John accurately describes. So and there are many, many other examples of that. One could use Morangi, for example, in Zimbabwe, which is even more desperate, for example, than the Namaqualand situation we have in South Africa. So how can we change that? Because we've got to look for the future. Maybe what we have to do as a diamond industry is lobby that much harder that a portion of the revenues that go to central government and the state must actually come back to the local environment itself to create a sustainable situation for that community and for their lives into the future that goes beyond diamond mining itself. I know when De Beers were looking at Namaqualand, for example, they were looking at aquaculture, mariculture, and all of those kind of things to carry on, but they were doing it as part of their social license to operate. What I'm advocating here is we need to lobby that no more taxes, please. Taxes must stay as low as they can so we can actually build the business. But a portion of that state revenue must come back to the local community so there can be some form of sustainability going into the future.
I'm sure John would be very satisfied with your answer on that one, James. Excellent. Paul, another question from someone that works in the Nigerian Geological Survey Agency and is obviously also sort of strong in the exploration field. And he wants to ask, will lab-grown diamonds last as long as natural diamonds? I haven't thought about that, but interesting question.
Yeah, so I don't know if he's talking technically or physically. So a man-made diamond is physically diamond. So, at least the large majority of the physical characteristics are the same. But I think talking about supply, kind of comes to mind, and I think it's important to understand. There's a lot of talk about how we're running out of natural diamonds, and we're not going to have any natural diamonds to sell to new consumers in the years to come. But I think with mining, as hopefully a lot of your listeners are aware, I mean, as the price goes up, the number of economic ore bodies increases as well. So maybe at a current price, there aren't a whole lot of economic assets out there that are undeveloped. But I think just as with any other commodity, whether it's gold or copper, or diamonds too, if we see higher prices, all of a sudden, more assets become economic, which results in more supply. Diamonds a non-renewable natural resource. That's one of the biggest distinctions, between man-made diamonds and natural diamonds. Man-made diamonds, again, it's a manufactured product. Completely different supply constraint from that standpoint. But I would just, remind everybody that, there are diamond deposits out there that just may not be economic at current prices. But if we see, higher prices, which I think we will, at least in nominal terms, in the future, we'll see new supply come online.
Brilliant, Paul. Thank you very much. I think we do have that second video that we have with Elo chatting to David, so I'm going to jump back to that video next.
So it brings me to our last question, and obviously you mentioned the mission of the council and bringing more visibility to the industry and bringing the consumer to fall in love with diamond again and get the spike again. What do you think is the outlook or perspective on the global, the future term of the natural diamond market? How is it going to evolve according to you, and what space can we expect it's going to take?
So, being a newcomer to the industry, I am very respectful to the many people that have spent many more time in it than I have. I think I'm generally known as the most optimistic person in our industry. So our industry doesn't always exude optimism in what we do. But actually, I believe it's an incredible industry. I think it's an incredible product. I think everything that we do in our channels, digital, consumers engage with in far greater numbers than in the fashion industry. So consumers still love diamonds and diamond jewelry. They love what diamonds stand for, and particularly at the moment, they're looking for products that aren't just a short-term endorphin rush, but instead that they maintain their values over a lifetime and become heirlooms. Ultimately, no one ever throws away a natural diamond. So
no, absolutely,
it tells you everything you need to know about what natural diamonds stand for. And I think our challenge is very simple. Our challenge is making sure the right messages are delivered to the consumer. We've got to dominate the digital communication channels and understand those and speak in a relevant tone there. There's a lot of fashion trends that are coming through that are in our favor. The fact that, like we are now, we're on a Zoom call, and as soon as we can all go out and dine out and celebrate and travel, so there'll be a very clear trend towards people dressing up.
Correct.
I think also, as a response to the Zoom world we've lived in. I think
swapping those track pants for diamonds again.
Yeah, the fact that I think business attire will become more casual because we've been more casual. I used to wear a tie, and apologies for those of you that like wear a tie, but I used to wear a tie. I think business attire will become more casual.
Correct.
So going out attire will become more dressed up to go with it. The number of weddings in the major markets of the world are forecasted to go up again to pick up on the impact of the pandemic. So there's a lot of factors that are in the favor of the industry in the short to medium term. And I actually believe that gives us the power to build this as a long-term growth plan. I set out some very ambitious goals in our industry. Said, look, I believe this industry can grow 50% in the next 5 years. And I said that just before the pandemic. and ironically, it looks, and everyone said, look, you're new, you need to understand this, and it's kind of, but guys, look at the potential upside, where the potential.
That's what's happening.
Yeah, and already I think this year in the US, which is 50% of the market, the industry will grow around 30%. So
fantastic.
As I said, I think there's huge potential. I think it's dependent on the whole of the industry understanding that we're a luxury good. and what goes into that. We're a consumer good, not a commodity. And with everyone's support, and they've been so supportive so far, which we appreciate, then we believe we can continue the magic.
Thank you, David. Thank you for that. And of course, for our audience, don't forget to check out the campaign that David mentioned. Thank you, by the way. I think it's very important. It's something that speaks to the audience. It's important that you mentioned the giving back that's being done all across the industry, and it's something that's being very appreciated, I think, from the consumer. They are now looking closely at where is my diamond coming from and what's happening, in the backstage. So thank you for that. Pleasure. I think it's brilliant. And thank you for your optimism as well. I think it's very encouraging for the industry. As you said, we don't meet many people and stakeholders in the diamond sector that are so optimistic. So, let's hope for the best. And thank you so much again, David.
It's my pleasure. Lovely to speak to you.
Thank you.
Again, such amazing insights from David. Hey, don't you both agree?
Absolutely.
I don't want to dwell on it too much because there's more audience questions coming in, and I do want to get through them, and we are sort of heading towards the end of our session. So Paul, a question for the audience from yourself, and then James, I'm going to give the next one to you. So Paul, Edward Johnson, he's a consultant, is asking, how do we control truth in advertising and marketing and ESG claims made by both lab-grown diamonds and natural diamonds? Tough question. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Thanks to Ed for joining. Ed hosts the CIBJA webinar series. It's one of the best webinar series in the industry, so it's nice to have them join. But it's a really important question. It's a difficult question. I mean, I don't think there is a good answer to it at this point. I think when you look at say the man-made diamond industry right now, it's kind of like the wild west. It's very new. It's kind of progressing very quickly. I think there are unsubstantiated claims being made. And I think it is a problem. I think it's going to take some time for it to kind of even out. I think regionally there's regulatory bodies that their job is to make sure that claims are substantiated. So I think that will help. But at the end of the day, I think it's just going to take some time. But I would like to see the leading companies in the industry, that the large retailers, the large luxury companies, kind of really doing their job to kind of get the word out to consumers, describing what the product is and how it's different. I think that's kind of the only way that's really going to get ironed out.
Awesome, Paul. Thank you very, very much. James, seems like we save all the hard questions for you. Another great one, but maybe a little bit of a tough one, but yeah, I think give a go at it. And question 5 is actually coming from the chairman of the African Diamond Council and African Diamond Producers Association. And he wants to know, or he's saying, the natural diamond industry is well established. So why aren't end users in consuming nations like the USA and China not actually being properly educated or made more aware of the vast advances with regards to environmental impacts, particularly in Africa?
Laura, thank you very much for that. And again, a very, very important question, I think, for all of us. And I've got a multifaceted answer here. I think picking up on what Paul said a moment ago, organizations and companies such as De Beers, Petra, Lucara, and the Natural Diamond Council are doing an absolutely phenomenal job in terms of marketing exactly what the gentleman referred to. And juniors like ourselves are also trying to do what they can in this particular area. And one example which we used at Rockwell, for example, is when we sold a very large high-value diamond, the new owner of that diamond wanted to know the story about it. Where was it mined? Who are the people who mined it? What did the environment look like? What did the technology look like? So that question which the gentleman referred to all came to pass in a story. Now, what more could we actually do about it? If we go into a jewelry store in the States or in the UK or into China or those kind of areas, it's a sterile. It's a sterile kind of scenario. You go in there and there are lots of magnificent diamonds plus lots of other good things as such, but there is a big disconnect there between the end product there, the jewelry, and where it's mined, whether it's in the Arctic of Canada, whether it's in the deserts of the Kalahari. Somehow we need to be able to translate the story of Diamonds for Good, for example, in Botswana, which is where we're listed from, all the way through to the end consumer. So that person knows those diamonds are being used for good, and they can see pictures, they can see photographs, they can see videos. So that experience of diamonds doing good for Africa is made real in the retail store.
Thank you so much, James. I'm going to ask each of you to maybe give a closing remark on today's session, 30 seconds, since we are very close to the end. Paul, just your last closing remark, if you can, in just maybe 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'll try to be quick here, but I just wanted to make one comment on ESG, and just talking from a business standpoint, putting the the value side of the equation aside. I think diamonds are perhaps the highest end luxury good you could buy, and they need to make consumers feel good. It's a discretionary item. We don't need diamonds, but we want them. So again, we need them to make us feel good, or what's the point? And I think the diamond industry is uniquely positioned, with regard to ESG related initiatives. And you look at the global scale of the industry, the sheer number of stakeholders, the mixture of cultures involved. But we're seeing initiatives across the supply chain evolving at an unprecedented rate right now when it comes to sustainability and ESG. And I think most in this industry are on the same page. So it's nice to see this play out, and let's keep it going.
Thank you so much, Paul. And James, if you can give your closing remarks on some of the things that we've discussed today and what stands out for you.
Thank you, Laura. The whole subject we've been talking about is lab versus natural diamonds and ESG and exploration. But I would like to maybe step back a little bit from this. I think that, as both Paul and David have mentioned, there is a place for lab diamonds, there's a place for natural diamonds, but there's a big but. Would you celebrate the ultimate human emotion, which is love, with a lab diamond, or would you do it with a diamond that's been born in the bowels of the earth billions of years ago, is unique and it's natural? I think there's only one answer to that question. I rest my case.
Oh, James, I know what I would choose. So thank you, James. Thank you, Paul, for your insights, your expertise, your time today. Elodie and I are going to take just 2 or 3 minutes to do a debrief from our perspective on the discussion today. So you're more than welcome to stay tuned for that. Hi, what are your thoughts after James and Paul's very insightful input on our discussion today?
Yeah, that was great. I mean, the thing with diamond, it's a very particular commodity because I think they mentioned it's very emotional. You don't buy copper for the emotion of it because you want it on your finger. Same with lithium. So the market dynamics really pretty much depend on the emotional buying into it. And I think it's something that come up quite a lot, and that is defining the market trends. I don't know what you think about it, Laura, but there's something around the emotion always trumps the economics in the diamond market. And obviously you don't buy diamonds because it has an investment value. There's an emotional purchase to it, and I think it's where the true value lies. At the end of the day, it's the end user, which is very different. But the lab-grown industry, for me, I've presented an alternative and offered a wider audience to access the diamond market in a way that was not necessarily touched before. And I think Paul mentioned the marketing is crucial on it. David mentioned that as well. The diamond market, and no offense, is a dinosaur environment for some. It's a very old way of marketing it. It's starting now to touch social media and engaging a different audience in a way that it wasn't touched before. So I think it can really reach a bigger audience. So it's a very interesting debate, and I really appreciate it that it came down to that discussion. So I don't know what was your highlights on that, Laura?
Ella, I came into this discussion biased, and I leave this discussion biased. And I think natural diamond is just an absolute no-brainer. The way James ended is just exactly what you have to think about, and that definitely resonates with me. I think one of the key things that also stood out for me is when James spoke about environmental footprints and the fact that diamond mines in many instances are actually having a negative or zero carbon footprint. I mean, there's this perception about diamond mines, about mines in general, about how poor they are in the environment, and actually there's just a big education piece in this regard, and that definitely applies to diamond mines as well. So good to know how much the diamond industry is actually giving back to the environment and to people in the countries in which they operate. So those are the sort of key things that really stood out for me. So again, James and Paul, thank you so much for sharing those insights with us.
Yeah, thank you guys, and we hope that let's get those weightings on so we can get the diamond market going back up after the pandemic.
I've just got to share. I've just got an email from the CEO of the Botswana Chamber of Mines, and he said, "Well done for flying the diamond flag and for the Botswana flag."
There you go.
Excellent.
Doing a good job then. That's fantastic.
It's part of my job, isn't it?
No, it's very, as I said, it's a very interesting and compelling commodity because it doesn't work like any of the others. So that's why it was really interesting to dive this topic with you guys, and I think we're gonna have to go because it's time. Thank you so much on behalf of myself and Laura, obviously of Africa Mining Forum and Mining Over Africa. Thank you very much for our panel today that shared the valuable insights, and of course our wonderful moderator Laura. You can access this webinar on demand, obviously, as I mentioned. It should be available either today or tomorrow through the same platform that you're watching it now, so you can share it with your colleagues or peer of the industry, and also use it as a way of making new contact. We had really good questions today from very interesting, I would say, mining professionals, so I would definitely advise you to go and engage with them next. What's next for the rest of the year? We won't be running more webinars until the end of the year, but we have a better plan in store with you, for you, sorry. Africa Mining Forum digital event is coming back on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th of November. And we mentioned ESG today. We'll be diving straight into ESG for 3 days. So you can expect an innovative format with technology roundtables, country focus, an award ceremony, fire chats, and more. So save the date now, register online, and watch the space as we'll be revealing some of the speaker and feature next week. Thank you very much. Thank you, Laura, James, and Paul, for your insight and trust. Keep well.
Cheers, everyone.